In this lecture, we will discuss the issue of desertification. So, in the mains exam of 2020, there was one question on desertification, that is in GS1 paper. So, the question was, the process of desertification does not have climate boundaries, and we had to justify it with the help of an example. So, there are three important parts in this particular question. One is desertification. Second is its unrelatedness in terms of climate. And third, we had to justify these particular aspects with the help of an example. So, your answer had to contain these three parts. Now, most importantly, as I have had a conversation with a lot of candidates on the very same question, I have found that a lot of candidates have misinterpreted this particular term, that is desertification. They have interpreted it as the expansion of desert, right? And that is what we would generally tend to interpret this particular term on the face of itself. Also, most importantly, a lot of candidates from geography optional have aid in the very same manner, and that is why I have chose to discuss this particular question. We will first understand what this term desertification is, then we will move on to what this actually question meant, and we will take one example with which we will establish the fact that really desertification has no climate boundaries. So let us first understand the desertification. So there are two ways to approach this particular term, that is desertification. So, in traditional terms, desertification is a process by which deserts encroach upon non-desert areas, right? So this is how you could have simply explained or understood the desertification. And this particular phenomenon is you can widely see it in Sahel region, that is the particular region which is surrounding the Sahara desert. So here somewhere is Sahara desert, and in this particular area there is this Sahel region. So what is actually happening, that this particular Sahara desert is encroaching upon this particular region in Africa, right? So that is one example of it. Then there is Gobi desert in China and Central Asia, that is Mongolia, area of Mongolia and China. And finally, our very own example, that is Thar desert. So when it comes to Thar desert, you would be noticing that it is in the Rajasthan, westernmost part of Rajasthan, but from that particular part, desert is encroaching upon or extending in the area of Haryana and Rajasthan. Sorry, not Rajasthan, Punjab, right? So that is what the exactly, if you can see the process of desertification in very traditional terms, that is the process by which deserts are encroaching in non-desert area. But that is how not we have to see this particular term desertification, because till as late as 2005, this particular idea of desertification was very correct. But after that, there were a lot of discussion, and the meaning and scope of this particular term desertification was then expanded to contain a larger phenomenon of land degradation, which in semi-arid, arid and subhumid areas. Fine. So now there is one United Nations Convention to combat desertification, and as per UNCCD, desertification is very precisely defined as the process of land degradation in arid, semi-arid and dry subhumid regions, which is a result of various factors. Those factors are these factors could be climatic variations, human activities, so on and so forth. So to sum up it, land degradation in arid, desertification is a land degradation in arid, semi-arid and dry subhumid regions resulting from various factors including climatic variations and human activities. Now this desertification also includes temporary and permanent decline in the quality of soil, vegetation and water resources or wildlife, for example. Now what we are actually intending to say here is that this land degradation should be in such a way that it reduces the biological potential of that particular land, right? So irrespective of where the land is situated, it could be like it has not to be situated along or by the regions of desert. It could be in some arid areas, in semi-arid areas, and even in dry subhumid areas. So in all, the process of this land degradation should be so harsh. Sorry. Okay, so this land degradation should be in such a manner that there is loss of soil quality, there is rather reduction or decline in soil quality, there should be loss of there could be loss of vegetation also, water resources and wildlife. And a cumulative impact of all these factors is that the biological potential of that particular land is going to get destroyed or declined in such a way that the whole land would become ultimately a desert in next few years, right? So that wide the definition of desertification is, and that is why a lot of people have erred also, and they have went simply by this particular definition, that is desertification as encroachment of deserts in non-desert area, right? So not just candidates from like for general studies say in geography optional, and even some of the faculty members I have seen that they have erred in this particular area. So we have to understand desertification in its widest of the context, and that is how UNCCD defines it, which I have presented here. Right now, why this question came in this particular paper? So there is very simple answer to it. There was conference of parties in Noida in 2019. In September 2019, there was this particular conference of parties in Noida, and the theme of this particular conclave, COP, was land degradation neutrality. Okay, so from that particular event, this question comes because when this particular event took place in September 2019, so that in that year mains was already being conducted then, and it barely has been 1 year now since then. Sorry, more than 1 year, but that is how the question now appears in your paper, right? So now we have understood why this question has come, what exactly the desertification, the term desertification is, and we also have seen that what we were supposed to write in this particular question. So we had to explain the desertification first, then we had to establish the fact with the example, with the help of example, that the process of desertification has no boundary. So we will further understand the term desertification again. We have seen earlier definition, so we will again widen our scope of discussion around desertification. Then we will move on to a particular example where we will establish that desertification has nothing to do with the climate boundaries. So now let us see how desertification is taking place in India. So there is one land degradation atlas of India, desertification and land degradation of land degradation atlas of India. So this particular atlas is presented by ISRO. So ISRO conducts a lot of remote sensing activities. It generates a lot of data, and through that remote sensing data, it has identified certain patterns in which we are getting the desertification and land degradation atlas of India. So there are some statistics also which are presented in this particular atlas. So as per that particular study, 96.40 million hectare area is undergoing land degradation in India, right? So that is around 30% of total geographic area of India. It is undergoing land degradation. So this is most important aspect of these findings. Now further, there are states. We have identified those states where this kind of land degradation is taking place, and these states are Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Jammu and Kashmir, Jharkhand, Odisha, Telangana, Haryana, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh and Arunachal Pradesh. So these are particular states where the process of land degradation is very strong. Now if you can see all these states, you can see there is Rajasthan, there is Maharashtra, there is Gujarat, Jharkhand, and even the states where there is high rainfall, that is Jharkhand, Odisha, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, so on and so forth. Now if you take the example of all these states, you can very well understand the fact that it is not actually occurring in and around the dry regions of India, that is say Rajasthan, along the borders of Rajasthan, the Thar desert. So desertification is not actually only taking place around these areas, but it is taking in a very wide range of states. So that is why you can again establish this particular fact, but we do not very clearly get a sense of the fact that desertification has no climate boundaries. We can only empirically establish this particular point, right? So we will again in further discussion we will concretize this particular idea. Now there is one more finding. You can move on to point 4, that is highest increasing land degradation is in Lunglei district, that is in Mizoram. Again we are back to same point, that this particular region, that is northeast in Mizoram, there is again a lot of rainfall, but we have a district which is witnessing highest increase in land degradation, right? And there is highest decrease in one, I guess Barmer state is there in Rajasthan. So in this particular state, this is again the state in desert, right? Or there are desert like conditions, and that particular state there is highest decrease, but in Lunglei, that is in Mizoram, there is highest increase. So now let us see what are the causes. So causes are very simple, that is water erosion, vegetation loss, and wind erosion. So because of these three most important factor, there is desertification and land degradation taking place in India. So that is the finding of desertification and land degradation atlas of India. So there could be like, you would find that again in 2019 or 2016, I am not very like clear with this particular year. So in this particular year, this particular atlas was published, and the data in this particular atlas is from 2011 to 2013, I guess. So I'll again confirm this particular fact in description box. Now moving on, this is how the map of desertification in India looks. So this is the 2003 to 5, and this is in 2011-13, right? So let us do compare. You can see these particular areas in black where desertification is taking place at a rampant pace, right? So very well widely spread out. Even in the this Gangetic Delta, you can see that there is a lot of desertification in Telangana, Maharashtra, Jammu and Kashmir, so on and so forth. Again this particular region in northeast areas, you can see a lot of desertification or land degradation has taken place, right? Even in Bihar. So that is about the degradation and the land desertification and land degradation in India. Moving further, there is again certain regions in the world where this particular process is taking place. Most importantly, there is northeastern Brazil. Again, this particular region, northeastern Brazil, is a wet region, or say humid or subhumid region, right? Again there is southwest Argentina, southern Sahel. So Sahel is again anyway infamous for desertification. So this is most infamous region for desertification. Rather it is also one of the region which has witnessed the process of desertification at the highest level, right? And finally, there is interestingly sub-Himalayan region makes into the list of desertification as well. So these are the regions in the world where we can see the process of desertification and land degradation. Now moving further, we will see what relationship is there between climate and desertification. So certainly, though question asks you, so the question, I'll again repeat the question. So the question is, the process of desertification does not have climate boundaries. and justify with the example. So there are two parts to this question, like desertification is happening in certain areas which have a peculiar climate, and another part is desertification is also happening in areas irrespective of their climate, right? So we have to say these two things in our answer, then only we will be able to answer that desertification is irrespective of does not have climate boundaries, right? So say areas where climate is in such a way that it would lead to desertification, and then there are areas where climate, irrespective of the climate, there is desertification. So let's come back to the climate and desertification topic. So let us see within climatic boundaries how desertification is happening. So in arid areas there is an increase in desertification, that is from 1.4 to 3.4 it has increased. Now there is one more example, that climatic shift is happening in tundra climates. So tundra climates are translating into continental climates in Canada and Siberia, and 67% of desertification is happening in dryland areas, right? So you can see all these 3 points, they are very specific to climate, and we can witness that the process of desertification has something to do with climate as well. So there is some climate boundary to it, right? So that is first part. Now if you move further, we can also witness this particular phenomenon in with irrespective of the climate. So let us take example of Amazon rainforests. And Amazon rainforest is one of the region where there is like land degradation is taking place at the highest pace. So to give you a statistics, around 4 million square kilometers of forest cover has been lost in last few decades. So that size is the size of India's tree cover. So you can imagine the quantity in which we are losing forests in the Amazon region, right? So this particular Amazon region is a rainforest region, and as a result of human activities, we have lost a lot of forests, right? Now there is one study in next point you can read, that if Amazon loses 3 to 8% of its forests, deforestation will start to feed on itself. So this is called as positive feedback loop or tipping point hypothesis. So what this positive feedback loop or tipping point hypothesis is suggesting, in this particular case we will see that if we do some 3 to 8% of deforestation in Amazon area, right, it will set off such a chain of event that then beyond this particular point, irrespective of what we are intervening or not, there will be a widespread deforestation which will take place on its own, right? So if we cut 3 to 8% of forests in Amazon, beyond that point such a climatic cycle will set in that it will lead to a widespread deforestation in Amazon, and eventually this particular Amazon rainforest, it will become dry grassland, right? So these dry grasslands are called as cerrados. So these are like savannas in Africa. So that is how we are facing a danger in Amazon rainforest. So you can very well see that now the process of desertification and land degradation is irrespective of climatic boundaries, and that is why if you give this particular example, you can very well establish your opinion that the process of desertification does not have climate boundaries. So we have justified it with the help of this particular example, that is example of Amazon rainforest, so it has already lost a lot of forest cover, and we are just, or we may be on the tipping point where things would go beyond our control, and eventually the Amazon rainforest would become a dry grassland, right? So that is what the question demanded. It demanded to you to explain something about desertification. So in simple words, in intro, you may have written the what is desertification, what UNCCD says rather about desertification, and then write how climate and desertification are related. Then also write that climate and desertification are totally unrelated while giving this particular example, right? So that is how you would write your intro body. And in body itself, you could also draw two maps. One is that of world. It would be completely fine if you are not able to draw the world map in terms of desertification, but it would have been like highly appreciated if you would draw India map in the context of desertification, right? So map should be there compulsorily. Fine. So that is how you could have answered this particular question. Now we will further our discussion on the impact of desertification, and we will also see what kind of solution we can arrive at, right? So when it comes to impacts of desertification, so let's make 4 quadrant. When it comes to impact of desertification, the very first impact could be on environment, right? Then there could be also an impact of economy. Now moving further, there are some social impacts of it, and finally there are political impacts as well, right? So environmental impact, I am not going to emphasize far too much on this particular part, because we all know what kind of environmental impact the process of desertification can generate, the process of desertification and land degradation, right? Now if we consider economic impact, it is going to affect the livelihood, right? It is highly going to affect the farming communities, right? Both the grain produce or dairying or other farming activities, all kind of activities are going to get affected as a result of this. Also there are some developing countries, right, where this particular process is taking place at a highest rate, and these developing countries are going to get affected at a much higher intensity as well, right? So that is how economy, in simply, I'm not taking a lot of examples in this particular area because it will only further or lengthen our discussion. So I'll just give you a brief idea what could have been written if you were to be write impacts of desertification. So you can write environmental impacts, some economic impact, most interestingly there are social impacts. So most importantly, women are going to get affected because of desertification. So what would happen that, like, as a result of desertification, ultimately there will be scarcity of water and other resources, right? So as there is scarcity of water, it would eventually affect the women, rather the poor women, and they would need to travel a lot to fetch water. Fine. Similarly, in terms of like decreased income, so economic impact would ultimately lead to decrease in income, and that is also going to affect women and children, right? Now it can also lead to some social tensions within the society itself. So that is also one important part of the social impact of desertification, right? So now that is how the social impact of desertification would take place in simple. If you want to add a lot of points or some more points, do please add those. I'm just giving you a brief outline of the idea surrounding it, right? Now moving to political impacts. So there was one article which suggested that a lot of crises in Sudan and in Sahel region has also to do with the the process of desertification, right? So there is like political turmoil in certain countries of Sahel region, and to be very specific, in Sudan, and also in Ethiopia, not to forget the current crisis, right? So it has its roots in desertification. How? So desertification would ultimately affect the economy would create social tensions in society, and the final result would be the political impact. So as resources get scarce, there is social tension, right? And politics of any country is then ultimately get divided based on social groups, right? So as resources get scarce, countries and populations are going to get divided into social groups, and it is eventually going to translate into political conflicts and political turmoil. So that is how everything is interlinked in this particular case, and you can briefly put a light on impacts of desertification. Now, what are the solutions available? Let us see what solutions are available for the same. This is from UNCCD page. So you just go to FAQs, and in FAQs this particular solution is very beautifully mentioned, right? So solution is: among practical measures undertaken to prevent and restore degraded land are prevention of soil erosion. So very simple thing. So let us have early warning system regarding the same, that where like we should identify the regions where soil erosion and soil degradation is taking place, and we also need to manage our water resources. Sustainable pasture. So pasture is one of the most intense reason which is leading into land degradation, right? So there is a process of rampant grazing, fine, and that ultimately affects the land and vegetation in that particular region. Similarly, forests are getting affected. We have to like manage our forests. And then there is livestock management. Again, it comes back to the point of pasture. As again, further innovative measures could be aeroseeding. So what we do, if this is a piece of land, an aeroplane would pass by, it would spread or throw away a lot of seeds from the height, and that would help in some growing some vegetations, right? So that is what aeroseeding does. So narrow strip of planting could help. To give you one wonderful example, that in the region of Sahel, there is one concept called as Great Green Wall, right? So if let me have a page. Okay, sorry. So if this is Africa, this is Sahara Desert, and this is Sahel region, right? So as we have already seen that in this particular Sahel region, this Sahara Desert is encroaching upon. So what initiative has been taken is that we are growing a belt of trees, right? So in this particular border, so we call it as Great Green Wall, or just green wall, right? And we also have seen that this particular green wall is helping in restricting the expansion of Sahara Desert, and this is one of the most successful initiative in the history of environmental conservation. So you can also mention this particular example in somewhere where there is mention of environment conservation of environment, and this is how we can restrict the process of desertification, that is through planting. Now we can also build some windbreaks, some shelter builds of live plants, again the same story, agroforestry ecosystem we can have, afforestation, reforestation, introduction of new species. So afforestation and reforestation, you can very well mention REDD and REDD plus, right? So that is one very handy solution. So then there are a few other aspects that we can grow a capacity to tolerate salinity or aridity. So we should have such type of species which would sustain in the region of high salinity and aridity. And finally, we should also have some environmentally sound human settlements. So it should be a fully integrated approach, as we have already seen that impact of desertification is going to be multi-pronged. That is, it is going to affect the environment, it is also going to affect the economy, societies, and political system. So as impacts are widespread, we need to have a fully integrated approach. So that is what all about desertification is. We have discussed the question which was asked in the GS1 paper. So the question asked us to justify the desertification having no climatic boundaries, right? And we have seen how desertification does not have any climate boundaries. We have also understood what desertification is. We have seen desertification and land degradation in and around India, across the globe, and finally we have seen the impacts of desertification and the solutions available for the same. So this was just a brief discussion on the process of desertification. So as there was question in mains exam on desertification, there could also be one more question in the prelims of 2021 on the same topic. So that is why do study it in further detail if available. So this is good for today. Like, share, and subscribe.